Everybody, this is JT Productions and welcome back to another video. Today's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be having a discussion about the conferences in college football and how they have been realigned and what I would do to kindly fix it, I guess. Well, before we start this, let's set some ground rules. Let's say that the NCAA commissioner or whoever supposedly is quote-unquote in charge over there set some qualifications for the conference realignment and everything like that. Let's say that they set a limit to the amount of teams in a conference to 16, which is what the SEC and the Big Ten will have once the teams that they've already had move to their conference get there. Another thing would be that another thing besides that would be that the ACC would need to pretty much renegotiate their contract with the ESPN so that they're not making half as much as the SEC or the Big Ten. So, cool? Cool. Okay, well, to start it out, let's start with the ACC. The ACC, along with its teams, has 14 teams, including teams like Boston College, Clemson, Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami, North Carolina State, Pitt, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. Now, what other teams would you add? Well, Notre Dame is a candidate. They play multiple ACC teams a year because of the agreement that they have with the conference. They play in the ACC, I believe, in basketball. They play in almost every sport in the ACC except for football. So that would be a candidate. So let's say that we put Notre Dame in the ACC. That brings them to 15. Who else? Well, if we were going about rivalry and geographically close to the ACC, we could go with a team like West Virginia. They would have rivalries with Pitt in the backyard brawl, and they would gain some with Virginia. And I forget what it's called, but they have one with Virginia Tech. I forget what it's called, though. Those would be two very good new additions to the ACC. Be new rivalries that could come from that. So, there's what I think they should do for the ACC. Next up, going alphabetically, at least for the Power 5, we have the Big Ten. They've already made their moves. They have USC coming in from Southern California, and they also have UCLA coming in from Southern California as well, both from the Pac-12. That should suffice for them. So, let's go ahead and move on. Not much to talk about there. Next, we'll go to the Big 12. Well, the Big 12, after losing Oklahoma and Texas, have Baylor, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas, and Texas Tech. 7 teams. Now, and this is also after losing West Virginia. So, that's your 7 teams. Well, what do? Well, they have 4 teams that will be coming in 2023, I believe, and those will be BYU from Utah, Cincinnati from, of course, Ohio, Houston from inside of Texas, of course, and UCF. That gets you into the Utah market, the Ohio market, the Florida market, and, of course, you're still in the Texas market. Another thing that you got to take into account with adding new teams to a conference is money and recruiting. So if you have a lot of states that you have teams from, you'll have a lot more market. So that's another thing I'm going to take into account. So now you have 9 teams. You need to get to 16. What other teams could you get? Well, you could go out and get a team that was formerly in the Big 12. Colorado. You could try and poach them from the Pac-12. bring them in. Now, right now, they're not really a good team. However, you get into the Denver market, Colorado for recruiting. Another team you could add is Utah. Get a big rivalry into your conference after Texas and Oklahoma leave. You get the Holy War with BYU and Utah. And you also get more into the Utah market. Now we have 5 more spots. Or, no, 2 more spots. And it's hard to say. Or 3 more spots, I'm sorry. Now, one thing they could do is go back to the well of the American Athletic Conference. You could take a team like Memphis, a respectable American team, SMU to get back with the rivalry of at TCU and SMU, and Tulsa. This would get you another team in Oklahoma. You'd get into the Tennessee market as well with Memphis. So those are the teams I think that if I was in charge, that's who I would put into the Big 12. Next up, we'll go to the Pac-12. The Pac-12 at this point, after losing both USC, UCLA, Colorado, and Utah to other conferences, they have Arizona, Arizona State, California, Oregon, Oregon State, Stanford, Washington, and Washington State. 8 teams left. There's not a lot of places they can go right now that's Power 5 talent. They can, however, get teams from inside the state of California to replace USC and UCLA. I'm thinking something like Fresno State and San Diego State. Get into the San Diego market and get one of the best Mountain West teams in Fresno State. Next up, after that, you can go after another respectable Mountain West team in Boise State to get into the Idaho market. And then you could go into Wyoming to get into the Wyoming market. After this, you could go after teams like New Mexico State to get into their market. And finally, you could go after the biggest market in the West, Las Vegas, by grabbing UNLV and Nevada. So there's the Pac-12. Next up is the SEC. They've already made their strides with getting Texas and Oklahoma last year. So that's not much to say about them. So there's the Power 5 and what I think is going to happen with them. So let's go to the Group of 5. Got to be very thorough. So let's start out with the American Athletic Conference, which is pretty much the creme of the crop of the Group of 5. Well, right now, after losing a lot of teams to the Big 12, you have East Carolina, Navy, Temple, Tulane, and South Florida. It's 5 teams. What I'm going to do for this, I'm going to say that another rule they put into place is for any conference you need at least 12 teams. Yeah, at least 12 teams to qualify this conference. So, what I did is I looked at who were available, especially in the independent. And there were 4 teams that I saw. The University of Army at West Point. This way, they're in the same conference as Navy to kind of keep that rivalry. Next up, I went and got some teams from the Sun Belt and Conference USA as well. Marshall, Old Dominion, and Louisiana. All 3 of those. Marshall and Old Dominion will be joining the Sun Belt soon. But I decided to go ahead and put them into the American because I feel like that the American would want to poach teams that didn't have like an affiliation with that conference. If it was free reign, I'm sure they would go for a team like Appalachian State, maybe even Georgia Southern, Louisiana Monroe, teams like that. So there is... Oh, I totally forgot to mention the other three teams from the independents. I'm sorry. The other three teams would be Liberty, the Liberty Flames, UConn, and UMass, getting into the Connecticut and the Massachusetts market along with the Virginia market. So that's it for the American. Now let's go to the next one, which would be the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt, after losing some teams to the American, would get would still have Appalachian State, Arkansas State, Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, South Alabama, Texas State, Troy, and Louisiana Monroe. They still have 9 teams out of 12 they need. So I would not change James Madison, which is going to the Sun Belt. But I would and Southern Miss, that's also coming to the Sun Belt. I would add one more Conference USA team, and this would get them a market in the state of Florida, which they did not have previously, and that is Florida Atlantic. This would give the Sun Belt kind of a market like the SEC has, with all over the Southeast you have a team in each state. Next up, we got the MAC. It does not change, so we'll go ahead and pass right by it. We'll go to the Mountain West Conference. This is one of the conferences that got gouged, especially by the Pac-12. Teams that remain out of it are Colorado State, Hawaii, Idaho, San Jose State, Utah State, and Air Force. Only 6 teams remain out of it. So, who would I add? Well, I'm going to finally go and drag down North Dakota State. North Dakota State has been an FCS powerhouse for the past probably close to a decade. And as well, I'm going to drag South Dakota State with them. Bring them over to the Mountain West, to the FBS, to see how they would do. Also get to the North Dakota and South Dakota markets for the Mountain West. Then it was kind of hard to pick. I thought about going for maybe like Northern Arizona, because I'd seen them kind of be competitive. But I decided to go to another market that has not been introduced in the FBS, and that's Montana. I grabbed the Montana Grizzlies and the Montana State Cougars, I think is their mascot. I'll have to check that. But gets you into the Montana market, and that leaves you with two more places that you can grab. I decided to grab Eastern Washington, gets you into the Washington market, and UC Davis. 2 FCS teams that have been sort of competitive with the Pac-12 teams. So there's your 12 for the Mountain West. And the final conference that I need to cover is Conference USA. Conference USA, by the end of this, has FIU, Louisiana Tech, Middle Tennessee State, UAB, UTEP, UTSA, and Western Kentucky. Now, there are some teams that will be joining this conference in a couple of years, those being Jacksonville State, the Gamecocks, and Sam Houston. That still leaves you with needing 3 more teams. So I decided to go after a local team kind of in the same area in UT Martin. UT Martin is kind of a low-key, pretty decent FCS team in the state of Tennessee. This will get you another team in Tennessee. and honestly pretty good. I could see them in the next decade or so becoming an FBS team. Next, I had to kind of look outside of the real East, and I grabbed Northern Iowa. They have really, like, the past couple of years given team like Iowa State a tough time. And they produced Trevor Penning, who was a first-round pick. So, I mean, enough time will get them to where they recruit better. That would bring in more money and bigger conference. That would give you more recruit. That would give you more money to put into recruiting. That would give you more good recruits, so on and so forth. And the final team I decided to put in Conference USA, it's South Dakota. Now, South Dakota, they're pretty good as well, like North Dakota State and South Dakota State. A little bit worse than them, but they're still a respectable FCS team. So, all in all, that's what I would do for the if I was in charge of rearranging the conferences by being similar to how they are today. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and go Dogs.